they don't go back very far, right? So one way of measuring how fast the world economy is growing is to measure how long it takes to get enough resources to feed another 1 million people, okay? And that would be at a starvation level, because at the end of the day, on $1.25 or its modern equivalent, then that's how most of humanity spent most of its time. In fact, it took us as a evolving creature about 1 million years to get to about 1 million of us. So the first 1 million years, it took 1 million years to get to 1 million more mouths. Then we learned how to farm about 7,000 years ago, and that number changed. And we speeded up a lot. In fact, instead of every 1 million years that we could afford to feed another 1 million people, it only took 200 years. What an enormous change that was. Then the Industrial Revolution kicked off, primarily in England, but then it spread around the world, of course, and that number changed. And it went from 200 years to, what do you reckon? 2 years. Now, Industrial Revolution's taken off, right? It's pretty good. It's been very successful. We're now at the next level. We're now at the digital age. So one way of talking about feeding 1 million more people is to talk about actually how many physical people you can feed. Another way of measuring it is how much to generate about another $400 million worth of wealth on a global basis, right? That's $1.25 starvation level for 1 million people. So in absolute feeding people terms, how long now? Not 2 years. What do you reckon it is now? 5 minutes. It's 10 days for actual food. It's 90 minutes for the amount of wealth the world generates. Now, why does any of this matter? Here's why it matters. Because all of us evolved in really the first box and a half. We are not used to changing at the rate that the world now changes. It's actually beyond many people's control. I think it's probably one of the reasons so many people are scared of the future, because they don't really understand it anymore. They probably don't even understand their present. So how do you make a decision, or any decisions, in a world where everything's moving so fast, but by the time you've made that decision, then it's probably, things have changed so fast you can't really keep up. Even 5 generations ago, our great-great-great-grandfather's life was not that much dissimilar to their parents' lives. But my son's life is wildly different to his grandfather's life. Things are entirely different. So the only way we can make decisions now is based on facts. Facts matter. So we should make fact-based decision-making, which is, so pleased I didn't have a beer before I started saying that sentence. So we obviously like facts, the nice solid things. We use them every day. People who don't make decisions on facts, we generally are a bit more nervous of. But let's talk about facts. There are actually about 6 levels of facts that I've perceived there to be. Range here, left to right, as level 1 through level 6 facts. So a level 1 fact is something that is basically irrefutably true, and self-evidently so. You know, I use this pi sign to represent pi because that's irrefutable. Pi is 3.15149265, whatever it is. It's really hard to deny that. Level 2 facts are things that are scientifically peer-reviewed. Now, science would never say it's right. It would say it's got the best, latest theory until someone comes along and proves it wrong. So that's what's known as a level 2 fact, peer-reviewed papers. Level 3 fact, I use Wikipedia as a level 3 fact. Who here wants to finish an argument in their house by saying, it must be this, it must be that, look it up in Wikipedia, you accept it, right? Because no one's going to go, oh, let's sign into our nature or our science profile. We probably don't have one. But we do have access to Wikipedia. So most of us spend most of our lives at a Wikipedia level fact. And in fact, depending on the topic, it can be highly accurate or it can be very suspect. Level 4 facts. Bloke down the pub said. Right? That's hearsay, Fox News, People magazine. That's, actually Fox News is not there. It's conjecture. Some bloke said it must be true. Right? Level 5 facts are simply things that aren't facts, they're lies, or things that are wrong. And then level 6 facts are the most dangerous ones, I would argue. They're things that are not only wrong, but desperately distorted and try and be higher level facts. We as individuals and as societies need to be very, very afraid of level 6 facts, and they're going to get a lot worse over the next couple of years when video editing allow people to have anyone say anything. That's pretty scary. Of course, represented here by InfoWars. So the problem with facts is they erode. Right? There is a concept, I didn't come up with it, but there's a concept called the half-life of facts. This idea that over time, facts erode. So let me give you a couple of examples. How many planets are there in the solar system? Anyone? 8, 9? Okay, you're just shouting numbers now, people. You're just shouting numbers. Right, so let me tell you. 30 years ago, there were 9. Pluto got demoted. And it's not come back because it doesn't apply, but that's not the point. Argued out with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but now there's Planet X, which they know lots about but haven't found yet. I'm not an astronomer, bring it up with them. Next, what causes stomach ulcers? Stress? Marriage, did you say? It's yours, you can do the presentation. It's not stress. Spicy food often comes up, it's not true. I'm sorry? A bacteria, well done. A bacteria causes stomach ulcers. The funny thing is, after it had been proven, the medical fraternity, which you painfully are not members of, took 17 years to adopt it, even though it had been proven. But everyone knew the answer. The last one, our dinosaur friend there on the end. Does he have feathers? Well, he doesn't, but he's a plastic dinosaur. Did real dinosaurs have feathers, yes or no? Interestingly enough, when the first Jurassic Park movie came out, they didn't know that, so they made them reptilian. By the time the last movie came out, they did know that, but decided it was going to confuse the audience so badly, they didn't do it. Isn't that interesting? So this is the problem with making decisions on facts. They erode. So things you know to be true turn out not to be true over time. So one of the things you've got to do is make certain that you're keeping up. So one of the things that people do is like to predict the future. And as Carswell said, the trouble with predicting the future is it's really hard, particularly about things in the future. So one of the best things to do, and a great British broadcaster said this, is why do we look to the past to help us predict the future? We do that because there's nowhere else to look. There is literally no other decision-making to do. So, to that vein, I want to introduce a concept to you called an accession event. And an accession event is a point at which success, either individually or as a company or as an entire society, changes to the point where what was success in the past now becomes failure. The strange thing is, people see them in retrospect, never think they're going to happen to them or their industry, and happen all the time. So here's the idea. So that's a Panasonic 5A. I used to carry one of those around for my boss in 1986 when I was first at work. So while not carrying £100 fax machines, I was carrying £25 mobile phones, right? And that phone cost more than the car it was installed in, particularly if you used it. So phones evolved, didn't they? So here's the question for you. If I got in my time machine, which I don't actually have, but pretend I did, if I got in my time machine and I came back to you in, I don't know, back in the eons of, say, 2005, and I said to you, hey, I've got the best phone in the world in my pocket. That sounds very strange. In my pocket. Tell me 4 things you could tell me about that phone. And you would go, let's see, phones have got smaller and smaller. The batteries have got better and better. The things have become really indestructible. And there's only a couple of companies who make cell phones. So I tell you what I can make. I tell you what I can tell you about the phone from 2019. A whole 14 years in advance of the point where I meet you. You could say it be the size of a credit card. The battery will last a month. It will be indestructible. And Nokia will make it. And I'll say, no, actually, it's twice the size of your phone from 2005. The battery barely lasts a day. It's $300 to replace the screen. And Nokia's out of business. That'd be a bit odd, wouldn't it? So these things look really easy in hindsight. Hindsight is the best. I mean, it's foolproof. I know what happened in the past. It's the future that's the problem. So my parents, grandparents, my great-grandparents, owned a wheelwright business in London at the turn of the 20th century and did very well. They made wooden wheels for carts. If I turned round to them in 1900 from my time machine and said, you need to get out of the wheel business because you will be replaced in less than 20 years and you will be bankrupt, they'd look at you and go, "Something stupid. The wheel, the single simplest machine in the entire universe, you're going to replace the wheel? What are you talking about? And by the way, we haven't changed the wheel in 3,000 years. How are you going to, it's nonsense." And of course, Henry Ford came along, and instead of a wooden wheel, we got a steel wheel with a rubber tire. So none of the skill sets my grandparents had, or great-grandparents had, were applicable in the new world. None. As you can see, I don't come from a wealthy family, because I wouldn't be here if I did. Much as I'm enjoying this, skidoos are still better. So you think, oh, well, that's obvious, right? If it's that obvious, what's next? Anyone? Airless tires. Is that really a development of the existing one? I'd argue it is. Electric car still uses tires. Floating on air. Who knows? Video conferencing. Have you learnt nothing, people? It's video. Seriously, you're going to have to do the whole day again. Another example. These are 2 training aircraft, less than 60 years apart. Tiger Moth T-38. It's pretty frightening. So if you don't know what the future's going to look like, how are you going to place bets on it? And of course, you can't ask your customers because of Henry Ford's problem, right? Customers ultimately, all customers, they suffer from the red bag problem. Do we all know the red bag problem? The red bag problem is you give someone $1 million in a red bag, and they go, oh, I thought it was going to be in a blue bag. And you're like, no, it's $1 million. Can't you imagine the blue bag? Oh, no, not really. No. It needs to be in the red bag, or else I don't think I can accept it. Just so you know, for the purposes of that, I can be colorblind. If you have $1 million, I will take it. But Henry Ford said, and he's right, if you ask your customers what they want, he said, faster horses. They want the status quo, but faster. I think in all the groups today, I hope I said the phrase, most people think the future looks like the past, just faster. It doesn't. That's why science fiction is always a reflection on the time it's made. It's not really a prediction of the future. It's a comment on the current or the past. So let's talk about the world we all live in, to a greater or lesser extent. You may not laugh at some of these. So six things have changed in the IT, communications, business world over the last couple of years. The first one is, all your customers are global, but so are all your competitors. The idea that you can be, and this obviously doesn't apply to Staples because you are an enormous organization, but the idea of being the local reseller for the Northeast Kansas area is no longer a meaningful statement. Thank you. Northeast Nebraska's just made it. One of the reasons of that is because of the cloud, right? The internet, to the cloud, the internet has changed everything. Absolutely everything in business. Things have got a bit cheaper, have you noticed? And the scale of things. These two devices are about 20 years apart. One's 1,024 times bigger than the other one and a quarter the size. And it probably costs 100th the amount in actual dollar terms, let alone per megabyte. It's insane the speed at which the price of everything is falling away to close to zero. Here's the other thing that never used to happen. When you'd speak to clients, you used to be the subject matter experts. I'm sure you are subject matter experts, but there's this annoying thing now, it's called the internet. Clients do have this habit of doing research, and in fact, 60% or more of the entire sales cycle happen before you even know the client exists. That's pretty scary. It's a wonderful opportunity if you grab it, but it's a very serious problem if you don't. So you stop laughing now. Here's the other problem. Do you speak your clients' languages? Because traditionally, in my world, in video collaboration, it was a specialist video conferencing manager, or maybe an AV manager, or occasionally an IT director or CIO. Today, it could be an HR manager, it could be a line of business manager, it could be a facilities person. And the words they use and the vernacular they have and maybe even the accent they use can be radically different to the people we use or are used to speaking to. So if we can't speak to them in a way that actually makes sense to them, we lose. There's an old German chancellor who said, I'll sell to you in my language, but if I'm buying from you, you speak in my language. Now, he was talking about German and English, but effectively, the conversation you have with a facilities person will be a radically different one than you'd have with an IT manager. By the way, just as an aside, and I don't try and mix them too much, but the conversations we had in my training sessions today are all about making certain you speak to people of different levels. Oh, and here's the other problem. You can't outwork the problem. Now, I don't know Staples as an organization, but I'm guessing, and please don't put your hand up because they'll shoot the guilty, who here's target goes up every year? Yeah? But do the number of hours they give you to do that target increase? Well, they do, don't they? Because they say you work 40 hours. And you might work 90 next month. But what you can't do is sustain it. You know, a 10% increase doesn't sound very much. but it becomes crushing over time. And part of the reason it becomes crushing is people use the same tools. So if someone says to me, I'll use me as an example, I won't pick on any of you, I'll use me as an example. If someone put a barbell on this stage and said, Simon, pick that up, it's got, let's make it realistic, 20 pounds on it, can you lift that? Yeah, I could probably lift 20 pounds. If they put 10% more on it, could I lift 22 pounds? Yeah. And it could keep going up. And over a period of time, I would begin to struggle. But if after the first repetition of putting 20 pounds on, they said, right, now here's 200 pounds, what would I do? Well, I wouldn't even bother trying to lift it. I can't lift, I mean, I have just lifted 200 pounds from that chair to here, but not above my head, right? Not another 200 pounds, can't do that. So what would I do if someone said you've got to lift 200 pounds above your head height? I'd probably go and find a forklift truck. They didn't say I had to use my arms, right? And that's something that most of us do. Most of us have a set of tools we use every day in our offices or in our minds, and I do this. That's easy. It isn't easy forever. What happens is it gets too tough and you get burnt out. And you and then the organization you work for both lose. So reinventing yourself to have the concept that you can actually go and get a forklift truck or a crane or whatever it takes is something you need to think about. The other problem that this causes is when you're working really hard, it's really easy to stop thinking. You become the Marines, a wonderful organization, but the guys on the beachhead have to take that hill. They're not interested in coming up with a special plan. They're interested in running up that mountain. The guys back at base are doing the thinking for them, and you've got to be careful that you don't just keep running into a minefield to get your legs, that's not good enough. You've got to be able to think what you're doing. Working too hard often makes you stop thinking because you're too busy. And actually, it can become cathartic to do that. I don't know what to do, so I'll work harder at this. Have any of us ever done that? That's a problem. In the old days, it probably wasn't a problem. When the world changes at every 90 minutes, it's a huge issue. So this is the inescapable facts. Targets go up, prices go down, you've got no more time. So it's business as usual then, isn't it? Happy New Year. And that concludes, I told you I'd have fun, didn't I? And I didn't even show the guys the slides. Like, it's got a nuclear weapon in it. So let's talk a bit about business models. I think this is pretty pertinent to you folks. So a typical business, you're the shop, by the way. Cute little shop. I like the clip art. The old model of doing things was manufacturer, me, or people like me, sell to distribution, who sell to you, who sell to clients. Voila. Easy. The trouble is, disintermediation, which is another word I'm pleased I didn't have a beer before. Disintermediation means lots of people, manufacturers, not us, but others, will go and sell directly to your clients because it seems like, well, I can just cut those other people out the middle. I suspect you're not big fans of that. You shouldn't be. So if you're going to survive, you can't just say, I don't like it. That's not good enough. You come up with a better answer. So that's a more realistic model. You take different devices or different bits from different manufacturers, you pat them together into a new shape, you then work through distribution or you do it yourselves, and then you sell that to multiple customers. A great example of that would be the relationship between Logitech and Microsoft, right? Microsoft make wonderful software, but without our pointing devices, without our keyboards, without our video conferencing systems, it's not much use. Oh, look, Windows is asking me to log in. I need a keyboard. So they need us, we need them. It can be very much more sophisticated, but that's a simple example of it. And then there's the supply chain model, which is something that I would argue that you all want to think about. So the supply chain model is this idea that not only do you sell to individual customers, but that you build relationships with your customers so they become the best salespeople in the world. And the best salespeople in the world are your existing customers. There's numerous reasons for doing that. The first one is all your customers know you're lying because your mouth is moving, right? Now, I'm sure you never lie to your clients, but they perceive that you do, right? Because, they've got a target to hit. I'm sure he's a nice person, but if another customer says they do really good work, then that's great. Now, in the world I'm in, specifically in the video collab world, think about how much more useful it would be. If you remember when you did the thing earlier today with me, I talked about more and more people joining the fraternity. Right, well, that's all great, but only if they talk to each other. So be the glue that connects all these different clients together. There's two reasons to do that. One, they'll go and sell for you, and they're really cheap. You don't have to pay them commissions. That would be unethical as well as not a very good idea. But also, it means that somebody else comes along and tries to replace you. They're going to have to replace you throughout the entire supply chain all at once. It's a lot harder to do. Let's talk about sales. Sales is an interesting thing. When I started work back in the 80s, there was sort of two types of people in the office. There were salespeople, did all the work, and there was marketing, who did all the brochures. And there was a very clear distinction between those two groups of people. But as we move to a cloud world, the idea of selling a customer a $10,000 fax machine, boom, put it in, no problem, plug it in, away you go, goes away. We're now talking to clients, and many of them are buying this stuff on a reoccurring revenue. So if they're buying on a reoccurring revenue, when's the deal done? Is it done after they've signed up at the first month or after month 36? Also, who's in sales exactly? Because 60% of the sales cycle happened before you even knew they existed. And then the other thing to consider is if a client's got a problem and they ring up and it's support who's answering the call, well, is support really now in sales? So we're now living in this world, and I'm sort of a pretty old school sales guy, who spent 10 years in marketing, by the way, but I'm still a sales guy. If you cut me in half, well, I'm dead in a bloody mess, but you know what I mean. Okay? So sales and marketing are becoming the same thing. If you think that sales is about an individual, marketing is about the mass. Everything is on that line. So everyone is in marketing, everyone's in sales, support is sales, dogs and cats are living together. It's a new world. And I think you need to consider how you live in that world. So let's talk about old and new salespeople. So certainly when I was a young man, salespeople were the engine room of the organization. They were Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. We were gunslingers. We can do anything we like. Bring in a number, bang. Great fun. Who here has seen the film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Great. Well, for those of you who haven't seen it, they die at the end, sorry. It's important to the story. It came out in 1969, people. If you haven't watched it by now, I mean, come on. So let's talk about gunslingers. They're great individual contributors. They're very, very good, but they're not easy to manage. They don't work well in teams, and they're rare, right? You can't have huge numbers of gunslingers. So a better analogy for the modern world is Navy SEALs. They work as a team. They have more than one weapon, right? Gunslingers shoot you with a 6-gun or nothing. Navy SEALs have got all sorts of crazy weapons, including ringing in the Air Force, drop a bomb on them. Perfect. This is a better model. It's a better model for the individuals, and it's a better model for the organization. And by the way, at the end of Butch, they die at the hands of the Bolivian army. Sorry, I know I have ruined the film, but it is a wonderful film, and the music's great, and they won an Oscar. You should watch the film. And it's available on Netflix. Anyway, you don't need to have special forces, but you do need to have a trained army who know what they're doing enough to get the job done. dare I say, enough. They don't need to know how the satellite thingamajig, they know how, look, that's the loud end of the gun. It's over there, right? The simplest analogy I can give you to that is Google, Microsoft, or Zoom, small, medium, or large. You know what? You don't get paid extra to be clever. You get paid extra for selling more. Good for you. That's what it should be. This is what it's all about. A repeatable, scalable, sensible, non-killing yourself solution that isn't working harder. He's cute, isn't he? He's a cephalopod. He lives at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, about 6 miles down, and he has a life expectancy of 3 years. It's a bit sad, actually. He's a beautiful little thing. He's got little wings next to his eyes. Why have I put him up? Because he lives longer than your average salesperson does. Your average salesperson has a life expectancy in an organization of 22 months. Now, I'm not saying that's true here. I have no idea what it is for Staples, and the room has gone awfully quiet and dark. I wonder the PA system may fail any second. But here's a problem, right? If salespeople are in business, every company 22, you know why they are? Primarily because they arrive, they get a target with an organization, they hit the target for a while, they're lifting the weight, they keep putting the weights back on, more and more weights. At some point, the weight gets too much, they fall over backwards. They fail, they join another company, it's another barbell, they start again. Because they don't have the idea of reinventing themselves. If it makes you feel any better, sales management has an average life expectancy of 19 months. Now, I will say for the record, that's patently not true at Staples, and I think you should be extremely proud of that fact. And I mean that very sincerely, and not just because I want to leave here intact. But you patently have a different culture, and I'm pleased for you that you do. For most companies, it's a mess. You need to be able to scale. This whole idea, you can't just do the past like the future. It does not look like the past. So let's talk about diversity for a second. So who here knows of a concept called the 10th man? Anyone? Just to show hands if anyone's heard. Good, good. I've still got 5 minutes of material left. And half an hour to fill it. So the Israeli Defense Force in 1973 were told that the Syrians were massing on the border, and the Egyptians were massing on the border, and the Jordanians were massing on the border. And all of their diplomats were told that it's just exercises, don't worry about it, it's not going to happen. And then it did. And in 1973, the Israelis nearly lost Israel. 6-day war, very serious. They fought back brilliantly and pushed them all back. The reason that they believed all of their diplomats was because of groupthink. So what they did, they all saw the evidence and they decided, no, that's not going to happen. It doesn't seem reasonable. We won't do anything about it. So after that, they came up with a concept called the 10th man. And the 10th man is the idea that in a room full of, in this case, generals, one of them, at random, would be told, this is the consensus position, we all agree it, go and prove us wrong. So go out there, find the evidence to show that what the decision we've made is not the right one. Now, interestingly enough, they make it random so that it's not one person who's always the naysayer. And secondly, the naysayer doesn't need to believe it. They just need to go and find the evidence to support it. And what would happen is, and they've done it ever since, and lots of organizations do it, and if you don't, I'd recommend you do, is you build a culture where you can have someone who can be the naysayer and say, we shouldn't do this because of that, and allow them to go off and find the evidence. And maybe they're wrong, and often, most of the time, they probably are. But it makes you think again. And the reason I say that this is to do with diversity is because if you're from a certain culture, you think a certain way. So I'll give you a good example. There was a little bit of work done at Stanford recently by two post-grad engineers who were Indian guys. And they thought about building a microscope and a device for separating out blood, which would help people with malaria and a whole bunch of other blood-borne diseases. But the centrifuge they made cost a little less than an average centrifuge. So a normal centrifuge will cost you a sort of a fairly basic model will cost you $20,000. But for the developing world, of course, $20,000 is far too much. It needs electricity. It's a delicate piece of kit. Can't do it. Well, Westerners don't think about that. $20,000, just write a bigger check, right? We'll have another fundraising round. They thought differently. The centrifuge they built, anyone like to guess how much it cost? 57 cents. It's a piece of card with string on, and you do this. It works just as well as the $20,000 one, and you can post them. Well, actually, you could just stick a stamp on it and post it to someone. I mean, it's literally a piece of card. They also have a microscope that will do, I think it's 20,000 times magnification, costs $1.20. The other microscopes are tens of thousands of dollars. And because they thought about the problem, because they came from rural India, and therefore they knew that there was a problem. Westerners don't think, I need a microscope for 50 cents. It doesn't work that way. So if you have people, all of whom look the same, they all think the same, they have 10th man problem, they don't have innovation. It's unfortunately human nature though, because here's the problem. Most of us think we're a reasonable chap, or chapess, or chaplet, or whatever let's just go chap, right? I'm a reasonable chap. That person looks like me. They must be a reasonable chap. We should hire that chap. And it perpetuates. What we need to do is get out of our own skin and say, as organizations and individuals, that person is completely different from me. They're probably still a reasonable human being. Let's hope they are. I'm sure most are. But they'll think differently from me, and we'll have an advantage by having them as part of the team. 10th man, an important idea. That's pretty. Can't remember what it was about, though. We'll just look at that for a second, shall we? Ah, yes. Now I remember. So the other thing that I think we should all think about as both individuals and as organizations is talent and uniqueness. So can anyone, and by the way, if you do know, I won't know, but does anyone know who any of those bands are? They're all boy bands. Anyone? Bueller? Bueller? No one? I've done that joke already. No one knows who any of those people are, right? Who's that? I think we'll go with a unique look. Why was Susan so important? She was important because she sang beautifully and she didn't look like all the other canned people. I looked her up on Wikipedia, so obviously it must be true. She's worth 18 million. It's not bad, is it? She can sing a bit. She's no better than the 25-year-olds who look the same. So her ability to be unique was the thing that mattered. And we live in the world now where everyone can look like everybody else, and really the only thing that matters is being different. Now, you can be more wildly different than others, but I would argue that both at an individual and as a corporate level, the idea that you just are the same, or copy them, is a losing proposition. So, I don't know how many Texans we got in the room. Other Texans we've got in the room. Any Texans? Right. You guys know who Franklin Barbecue is? All right. Well done. Austin, Texas, Franklin Barbecue. So Franklin Barbecue is a place that makes barbecue. They're quite good. I personally don't think it's mind-blowing. And there's lots of places you can buy barbecue in Austin, Texas. However, if you want Franklin, you start queuing at 6 a.m. rain or shine, outside, in a long line. At midday, they'll open the door. At 2, they close the door. They often haven't even got to the end of the line. Come back tomorrow, we've run out of meat. It's just dead cow. Let's keep it in perspective. I'm not queuing up for 8 hours for a bit of dead cow. I'll go to Rudy's. It's drive-through. How about Yeti coolers? Who knows anything about Yeti coolers? Right? They've become pretty fun. It's a cool box, people. Keep it in perspective. Right? It's a cool box. Yeah, but it's $800 cool box, and it keeps it really cold. As I keep saying to my teenage son, add ice. You know how much a bag of ice is, boy? It's a lifetime supply for one of those Yeti coolers. But it's cool. They've made... My 17-year-old has a Yeti cooler sticker on the back of his car. Do you think he'd have one for Kool-Aid? Igloo? No, I think not. So you can make anything trendy. People say, oh, well, you know, Apple's got that wonderful brand. But so's Airstream. If you've ever looked at buying a caravan or an RV, as you call it here, Airstream are like quadruple the price of anything else. They're lovely. $130,000 for a 30-foot long, you know, aluminum, somewhere in the middle, box. 130. I'll just buy the other one for 15. It's all going to get ripped up in the tornado anyway. So all of these manufacturers have managed to be unique. And the way they do it is having a very small group. I call it the 1,000 true fans. Oh, good, it was that slide. The 1,000 true fans is a really good way of getting people who are fanatical about your products or services. They wildly overrepresent customers who are quite happy. Customers are, oh, that was nice. I've always said that nice is the worst compliment in the world. Nice. Love me, hate me, either's fine. Pick one. Pick love me? No, I'm just kidding. Nice is useless. Organizations shouldn't worry about nice. Worry about 1,000 people who think you are wonderful, because they will spread the word like crazy. If you are interested, I can either get a list together or I can send it to the right people, and you can all see a document I put together about 1,000 true fans a couple of years ago. You could do it either for yourselves, you could do it for Staples, you could do it if you have a side business, you could do it for that as well. If you're a narcissist, you could just do it for you. I did it twice. So I want you to think about a couple of things as we begin to wrap up here. There's an old phrase that says, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always had. And people nod sagely, oh yeah, that sounds right. It's a lie. It's a lie. Ask my grandparents. Ask Nokia. Ask Blockbuster. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get, yeah, just another video on the rack. I don't think so. Particularly in a world that changes this fast. The trouble is, all of us evolved at a time where that was true. Because we evolved somewhere between, depending on who you are, somewhere between 5,000 and 500,000 years ago. I'm not kidding, we're all evolved at somewhere in that. We're constantly evolving. But the rate of human change has far outstripped the ability of humans to cope with that. So the only way you can cope with this change is now constant reinvention. If you don't question everything you do, at least annually, and I'd recommend more often than that, then you're going to get left behind. So let's talk about some conclusions. Let's talk about facts first, right? Facts matter. However, be careful with your facts. They have this nasty habit of changing when you weren't looking. So if you've had this well-cherished fact about whatever it is, it might not be true anymore. So go and do some research. You better learn how to speak what your customers speak. The claw. What language were they speaking? A different one to most of us, I suspect. So we need to learn how to speak in the same way our customers do. Right? They can speak to us any way they like at some level, but we need to be able to if we're going to build a relationship with them, we need to understand what they're saying and speak to them in the same way. And then consider how you do your business model. So, Darwin said it best. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the ones best able to cope with change. So, with that, I wanted to thank you very much for your time. I will be around for a little while, and then I've got to go off and do reinvention somewhere else, I think. And it's been a real pleasure being in front of you all. Thank you very much.
Simon, thank you so